We are now nearly halfway through the 2025 college football season, and the transfer portal is a big reason why some teams are having success this year. In today's video, I want to spotlight players who transferred ahead of the 2025 season who have become elite and made huge impacts for their team. It's pretty self-explanatory, as I'm going to go through where they were before and what kind of impact they've made in 2025. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about some players from the portal who have been absolute gems so far. Okay, so the guy I want to first start with is Ahmad Hardy. Mizzou fans knew about this guy all offseason, but Hardy has become literally the best running back in college football this year. I mean, some will debate that it's Jeremiah Love, but statistically, Hardy currently leads the country in rushing yards as he has 103 carries for 730 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's also sharing the load with a couple of other good running backs as well, but Hardy has been absolutely insane. A year ago, Hardy was a true freshman at Louisiana Monroe, and he sort of had an impossible rise. Going back in time, he went to Lawrence County High School in Mississippi and was ranked as a 3-star recruit and the 153rd best back in the class of 2024. This would come after having 2,200 rushing yards his senior season, but it still didn't matter to recruiters. As a true freshman with the Warhawks, he'd end up running for 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns, and he'd enter the transfer portal and become a 4-star running back. He decided to go to Missouri, and the number 6 transfer running back has become a stud, as I've said, he has 730 yards and 9 touchdowns, and some are starting to say that he's getting Heisman buzz, and he's a big reason why Mizzou is currently undefeated and has a chance at a special season. For our second guy, we're going to take a look at a quarterback, and you guys all know the name John Mateer. You've probably heard his story by now, and it's coming out of Little Elm High School in Texas. He was very under-recruited and ended up getting a late offer to go to Washington State. After sitting behind Cam Ward for 2 years, Mateer took over as the starter in 2024, throwing for 3,139 yards and 29 touchdowns. On top of that, he also ran for nearly 1,000 yards and 15 more touchdowns, and Mateer was truly a huge deal. He became one of the top players in the portal, and he decided to follow his offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle to Oklahoma. Mateer was instantly seen as one of the biggest names in the country, and so far through 2025, he's been excellent. He's thrown for 1,215 yards with 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, while also rushing for 190 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was supposed to be the frontrunner for the Heisman, but then he ended up getting injured and had to have surgery. He's expected to be back soon, but Mateer is definitely one of the biggest names from this year's portal, and he has done a tremendous job so far. So the goal for this video is to talk about 4 wide receivers, 4 running backs, and 4 quarterbacks. And to talk about our first receiver, we need to talk about Emmanuel Henderson. Currently, he's one of the top wide receivers in college football for Kansas, but going back in time, Henderson had a unique story. He was one of the biggest recruits in the country as he went to Geneva County High School in Alabama, and as a junior he had 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and before that he had 2,000 yards and 32 scores as a sophomore. Henderson would become a borderline 5-star recruit as he finished as the number 2 running back and the 41st best player in the class of 2022. Henderson would arrive at Alabama, but unfortunately was never really able to see the field. He sort of switched between running back and receiver as he caught 1 pass in 2022, 4 in 2024, and also sort of just filled in wherever. At this point, everybody had pretty much forgotten about Emmanuel Henderson as he became the number 54 wide receiver transfer in this year's portal, which put him at about 320th in the nation. Pretty much everybody had forgotten about Emmanuel, but so far this season, he's become Jalen Daniels' top target as he currently has 23 catches for 435 yards and 4 touchdowns. That is near the top of college football statistically for receivers, and he's finally living up to his big-time status coming out of high school. This is one of those feel-good stories, and it seems that transferring from Alabama to Kansas was the perfect move for Emmanuel. Speaking of Alabama transfers who made a big impact in 2025, let's now talk about running back Justice Haynes. At one point, Haynes was also right up there with Emmanuel Henderson, as coming out of high school, he was listed as the number 3 running back and the 34th best recruit in the country. He ended up going to Buford High School in Georgia and was a year after Emmanuel. He was supposed to be one of the next big things for Alabama, as he ran for nearly 1,700 yards and 23 touchdowns during his senior season, and was considered one of the top athletes in the country. Haynes actually showed flash during his time at Bama, as he ran for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2023, and then in 2024, he ran for 448 yards and 7 touchdowns. Haynes also caught passes out of the backfield, so he was seen as a pretty decent transfer, considered the number 1 running back in the portal. He would decide to go to Michigan, and try to fill the gap of production that was left left by both Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mulling. So far through the first half of the season, Haynes has done just that. He's rushed for 537 yards and 6 total touchdowns, while also catching 9 passes out of the backfield. Him and Jordan Marshall are a tremendous 1-2 punch, and Haynes is getting a lot of NFL attention. He has a chance at being the next elite Michigan running back, and this was honestly a gem that Michigan got out of this year's portal. Switching back to the quarterback position, the Duke Blue Devils got a gem in Darian Mensah. I mean, they did pay a lot of money for him, as it was rumored that it was a $7 to $9 million NIL deal. Going back in time, this sort of would have been unthinkable, as Mensah was just literally considered a 3-star recruit. In fact, he was ranked as the number 112th overall quarterback coming out of St. Joseph High School in California, and this would come after having 2,300 yards and 25 touchdowns. Mensah would arrive at Tulane back in 2023 and would start in 2024 after Michael Pratt. He threw for 2,700 yards and 22 touchdowns and would enter the 2025 transfer portal, where he became the number 7 quarterback and a top 50 player overall. As I said, Duke paid good money for him, and so far he has performed. He's completed 70% of his passes, has thrown for 1,600 yards, and already has 13 touchdowns, compared to just 2 picks. He's not much of a runner, been really good for Duke so far, and they still have a chance at having a good season, so Darian Mensah was definitely a big pickup out of the portal for them. For our next wide receiver, we have another Alabama transfer, this time in Kobe Prentice. Coming out of the state of Alabama, Prentice was considered a top 100 recruit, number 15 wide receiver in the class of 2022. This came after having 711 yards and 9 touchdowns as a junior, and he was also a star track runner. Prentice would arrive at Bama with a good amount of hype, and as a true freshman, he caught 31 passes for 337 yards and 2 touchdowns. That would end up being his best year in Tuscaloosa, as in 2023, he only had 18 catches, and then in 2024, he only had 11 catches and 1 touchdown. He decided to enter his name into the 2025 transfer portal, where he became the number 42 receiver, a 3-star, and the 227th overall player. Prentice so far in 2025 has arguably become the number 1 target for quarterback Sawyer Robertson, as so far with Baylor, he has 16 catches for 235 yards and 5 touchdowns. Obviously, the touchdown number has been incredible for him, and if he can keep this up, he is definitely playing himself onto the NFL radar, if not already. Kobe Prentice is another feel-good story, and it seems like it's a good idea to go after Alabama players in the portal. For our next player, we're to talk about Mississippi State running back Fluff Bothwell. He's another one of those guys who emerged in the 2025 transfer portal, but before that, coming out of the state of Alabama, he was not very well known. Despite rushing for over 5,000 yards and 72 touchdowns during his final 2 seasons, he was only considered a 3-star recruit, and he'd end up at South Alabama. During his 1 season with the Jaguars, he ended up being incredible, as he ran for 832 yards and 13 total touchdowns. Because of that, Bothwell became one of the top transfers in the country, as he was listed as the number 5 running back and the 112th overall player in the portal. So far in 2025, he's helped Mississippi State get put back on the map, as through the first half of the season, he's ran the ball 70 times for 405 yards and 6 total touchdowns. Fluff has been a pivotal piece as to why the Bulldogs have been successful this year, and was definitely a good grab in this year's portal. Going back to the quarterback position, we need to talk about Carson Beck. Obviously, he was considered the top quarterback in this year's portal, and one of the biggest names in college football, but it was still a huge get for the Hurricanes. Last year with Cam Ward, he put up the stats, but they didn't quite have the team surrounding him, so they missed the playoff. This year it looks like Miami is a more complete team, and they got their guy. After throwing for 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns, Carson Beck was a 4-star recruit and would end up flipping from Florida to Georgia. He also gave up on baseball to do it. After sitting behind Stetson Bennett for a couple of years, Beck blew up in 2023, throwing for nearly 4,000 yards and 24 touchdowns. He would come back for 2024, throwing for 3,500 yards and 28 touchdowns, but he lost a couple of key games, threw more interceptions, and it looked like he needed 1 more year to refine his skills. So far in 2025, Beck has arguably been the best quarterback in the nation, throwing for 972 yards with 7 touchdowns and only 3 picks, and leading them to some pretty key victory. Obviously, there is still plenty of time, but it looks like Beck was worth the hefty paycheck. For our next guy, we're to talk about Tanner Koziel, who is sort of a wide receiver / tight end hybrid. He's definitely one of the most interesting players in college football, in my opinion, and he also had a really weird offseason. Coming out of high school, Koziel was only a 2-star recruit and was listed as the number 323rd overall receiver in the country, coming out of Nazareth Academy in Illinois. Koziel would arrive at Ball State, where he ended up putting up ridiculous numbers during his 3 seasons there. This past year in 2024, Koziol had 94 catches for 839 yards and 8 touchdowns and became one of the more sought-after players in this year's portal, at least somewhat. He was the number 3 tight end and the 72nd overall player, and he decided to transfer to Wisconsin. There was some drama this past spring about playing time or something like that, so Koziol decided to enter the transfer portal again, this time settling on Houston. So far through the first half of the season, Koziol has been incredible. He caught 23 passes for 234 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he's helped Houston off to an undefeated start. If he's a true tight end, he's putting up video game-like numbers, but some don't really know if he's a tight end or a wide receiver. He is 6'7". I definitely think he's going to continue to have a big year, and will also be an NFL draft prospect. For our final running back in today's video, we're going to talk about Kewan Lacy. As a Mizzou fan, he's a player that I'm familiar with, but I don't really know that much about. Coming out of Lancaster High School in Texas, Lacy was listed as a 4-star recruit and the number 15 running back in the class of 2024. This came after a high school season in which he ended up running for 1,500 yards and 19 touchdowns. He'd end up committing to the Missouri Tigers, where during his true freshman season, he'd end up running the ball 23 times for 100 yards. After the season was over, to a lot of people's shock, he decided to enter the transfer portal and just hours later would end up at Ole Miss. While Mizzou ended up getting their guy in Ahmad Hardy, Lacy was not really supposed to do much. He was considered the number 18 running back and the 277th overall player in this year's portal and was only listed as a 3-star. To many people's surprise, Lacy has blown up this year, rushing the ball 100 times for 445 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's already one of the best running backs in the SEC, and for a true sophomore, this is pretty impressive. He was definitely one of the more underrated players in this year's portal, and it seems Ole Miss got a complete gem in him. For our final quarterback, we need to talk about Fernando Mendoza. After Curt Cignetti found lightning in a bottle with Curtis Rourke last year, he's done it again, this time potentially even better, with Mendoza. Coming out of the state of Florida, he was originally a 2-star recruit and a Yale commit before a late recruiting rise would end up with him at Cal. After spending some time on the bench, Mendoza really took over in 2024, throwing for 3,000 yards with 16 touchdowns. He had a terrible offensive line and didn't have many weapons, so many thought he could be a lot better if he transferred to a better system. Mendoza ended up becoming one of the top players in this year's portal, following his younger brother Alberto to Indiana. So far through the first half of the season, Mendoza has been incredible. He's thrown for 1,200 yards with 16 touchdowns and just 1 interception. Indiana is once again undefeated. He's considered a first-round draft pick and has legitimate Heisman buzz. You could say Indiana did a great job getting him out of the portal. And our final player in today's video is going to be Mario Craver. Going back in time, he went to Clay Chalkville High School in Alabama and ended up blowing up into a 4-star recruit. He sort of made a shocking pick, as he'd eventually select Mississippi State, even though they were not in his final list of schools. He loved Jeff Lebby, and he had over 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns as a senior. Craver would arrive at Mississippi State, and as a true freshman, he'd end up catching 17 passes for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he also battled an injury and a suspension. It seemed that the two parties were not getting along, so he entered the 2025 transfer portal, where he became the number 13 wide receiver and the 58th overall player in the nation. He decided to commit to Texas A&M, and so far, alongside Kevin Concepcion, he's been incredible. Craver has already caught 24 passes for 477 yards and 4 touchdowns, including that monster game against Notre Dame. He was named the AP Player of the Week for that performance, and he's now considered one of the best receivers in the nation, and has a chance at winning the Biletnikoff. He's only a sophomore, which makes it even more impressive, and A&M did a great job getting him out of the portal. So yeah, in today's video, we talked about 12 players who transferred into new schools this year and have become stars, and let me know what you think. Who's another transfer that wasn't on today's list that I should include in part 2? Who's your favorite transfer in the country? And what topic should I also cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.